Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our third session of Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 1. So the chapter's called the first step in God realization, and we are up to the last section, which is from verse 23 to verse 39. Let's see if we can finish the whole thing today. Of course, it's a little hard to say, but we'll see what we can do. Sukadeva describes the universal form. Okay, let us chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasna Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaur Vani Pracharane Niravishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadejtarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Okay, so the first step in God realization is for people who are just not ready, not able to accept the normal, you could say, normal process of chanting and worshipping the deity, or at least appreciating the pictures of the Lord and his devotees like that, and not really ready to get into surrendering and rendering devotional service. So for people like that, then this chapter, the Bhagavatam, advises them to meditate on the universal form, Virat Rupa, or Vishva Rupa sometimes it's called. So there's been a whole lot of preparation in the previous 22 verses leading up to this point, and now here in verse 29, Sukadeva is going to describe or begin the description of the universal form. Of course, you know, the universal form is fairly somewhat complex, and there are descriptions in different places in the Bhagavatam of it. You know, I do my preparation during the day, and yesterday we were getting into the 10th chapter in my preparation. That's where I'm up to, the 10th chapter. And there's a whole thing about the appearance, the manifestation of the universal form. Oh yeah, it's a big thing. So that's the 10th chapter. Anyway, this is like an introduction to the universal form as such. So here we go, devotees. Verse 23. Shukadeva Goswami answered, one should control the sitting posture, regulate the breathing process by the yogic pranayam, and thus control the mind and senses, and with intelligence apply the mind to the gross potencies of the Lord, called the Virat Rupa. Okay, so let's have a look at the purport that Srila Prabhupada gives. So the problem is, or the situation, but it's a problematic situation, put it that way, that the conditioned souls, their minds are materially absorbed, and so therefore this a type of yoga system for meditating and coming to the point of being able to focus the mind on the Lord is being recommended. So, if it's not possible to cleanse out material absorption of the mind, then it's impossible to concentrate on transcendence in any way, in one way or another. So to help with this, they can try. That's the idea, to try to focus on the universal form. So these types of people, because they're definitely more like beginners and people who even haven't begun. They may have different attractions. They may be attracted to developing mystic powers. And this process may offer mystic powers, universal form, and sort of different branches of the approach. But so that they may be attracted like that, or impersonalism. But the real purpose here is to eradicate the dirty things, lust, anger, and greed, so the mind can become focused. So if the person who's trying to get into what has been described in the previous verses and is going to be described here, if the person becomes diverted by mystical powers, then the whole thing's a failure, because the ultimate aim is God realization and not to develop mystical powers. Therefore, the person's recommended to fix the gross mind by different conceptions of the universe, the world around us. Yeah, conceptions that, for example, the mountains are his bones, rivers are his veins, sun and moon are his eyes. These types, they're conceptions. Yeah, so by adopting these conceptions and seeing the world around him or her in those terms, they may realize the potency of the Lord, and it'll lead them to think that there is actually a real person behind it all. So, Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, as soon as the potencies are understood to be instrumental manifestations of the transcendence, one automatically advances to the next step, and gradually the stage of full realization becomes possible for him or her, for the person, the practitioner. Okay, let's have a look here. So verse 24. Verse 24. This gigantic manifestation of the phenomenal material world as a whole is the personal body of the Absolute Truth, wherein the universal resultant past, present, and future of material time is experienced. That's kind of profound. So in it, in the universal form, the universal resultant, past, present, and future of material time is experienced. Anyway, let's just see how Prabhupada explains that. You know, sometimes the language used when we get into these types of subjects, it's a little difficult to penetrate. So, okay, Prabhupada says, everything's an expansion of the energy of the Lord. And Bhagavad Gita chapter 13 verse 14 says his eyes, heads, etc. spread everywhere. As super soul, he can see, hear, touch, etc. anywhere and everywhere, even though he still has his own abode in the spiritual world. So even though he's in his abode, his energy is everywhere. Just like the sun is localized, but the sunshine is expanded all over. So as sort of primitive societies were amazed by things like lightning, mountains, etc. So in a somewhat similar way, less intelligent people cannot conceive of his real transcendental form. Krishna, the person with two hands playing the flute. Yeah, so they need some bridging process. And demons can't recognize the existence of the Lord at all, despite there being descriptions in Shastra, incarnations, and authorities who accept him. They can't. So they want to see with their own eyes. Therefore, they can see the universal form. At least it's a bridging thing from the position of just total ignorance to actually accepting the personality of Godhead and developing a relationship with him. Yeah, because they're used to there being higher powers. Yeah, they're used to that, like a tiger or an elephant. So they can respect such things. And of course, Krishna showed this to Arjuna in the 11th chapter. For pure devotees, they're used to seeing the two-handed form of the Lord playing on the flute. So, therefore, Arjuna, in order to see the universal form, he needed special eyes, divya chakshus. And when Krishna showed this form, it was not actually for Arjuna, because Arjuna doesn't need help so he can come to the point of accepting Krishna as a person and developing a relationship with him. He's already in a personal relationship. Therefore, he doesn't need it. But it's for the less intelligent people who just haven't got a grasp of these things. Of course, well, Prabhupada makes the point. You get these so-called avatars, so-called incarnations, who claim to be God. And Prabhupada says, if you meet one of them, ask him to show you his universal form. And when he can't, just tell him, well, listen, Krishna did. So, yeah, so we accept him. So until you do it, we can't accept you. So it's both a challenge and a favor for these people. Yeah. And if they can get it together, they'll become fit to see the real two-armed form of the Lord later. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, this is a favor of the all-merciful Lord to the atheists and the gross materialists. And on we go, devotees, to verse 25. The gigantic universal form of the personality of Godhead within the body of the universal shell, which is covered by sevenfold material elements, is the subject for the Virat conception. So Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, simultaneously the Lord has multifarious other forms, and all of them are identical with the original fountainhead form of the Lord, Sri Krishna. Of course, many of them may appear different, but actually, in fact, they're identical. So it's a dramatic presentation of creation and related things. So Prabhupada describes Krishna's inconceivable nature, how he showed this form for the unintelligent, because they can only see universal space, but they don't understand the universe. Krishna has innumerable forms, but he, meaning Krishna himself, is complete. Yeah. So the universe itself comes from Mahavishnu's breathing out, breathing in again, then breathing out again. In this way, the universes are created and they vanish. And Prabhupada says, people can concentrate on the universal form, but must be careful not to be misled by pretenders who claim to be equal to Krishna, equal to or identical with him, but can't show universal forms themselves. Verse 26. Persons who've realized it, means the universal form, have studied that the planets known as Patala constitute the bottoms of the feet of the universal Lord, and the heels and the toes are the Rasatala planets. The ankles are the Mahatala planets, and his shanks constitute the Talatala planets. So now we're getting the real description of the universal form. So Prabhupada makes the point, outside the bodily existence of the Lord, the cosmic, the universe has no reality. Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, verse 4, 3 and 4 explains how everything's resting on him, but it doesn't mean that everything is him. So what's the universal form then? It's a chance for the materialist to think of the Lord. But if he visualizes the world in the spirit of lording it over, that's not God realization. So the view of exploiting resources of Maya, that's their view, the materialists. So if anyone wants to progress on the basis of the universal form, they have to develop the service attitude. You see, there are these underlying points, they're really very important. It's not just, the universal form, ki jai, but you've got to see it in a certain way. Otherwise, it won't help you make progress. And Prabhupada says, otherwise, it'll have very little effect on the seer. So, of course, the Lord, in any form, is never part of the material world. So this universal form, which, is made up of all the different features of this world, it's a very unusual thing. In fact, it's not exactly a form of him. It's a device to aid meditation. That's basically what it is. So anyway, Krishna, he's always supreme, never affected by the modes. And then there's a second paragraph, universes divided into 14 planetary systems. From the middle going up, Bhurbhuva Swat, Mahajana Tapasatya, and then going down, Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patala. Yeah. So, yes. So here in this verse, the description of of the Lord and the form of the Lord is starting from the bottom of the universal form, from his feet, from the bottoms of his feet, actually. That's where it started. And we can have confidence that this description is really appropriate because Shukadev is such a bona fide devotee. His descriptions are always accurate. So we move on to verse 27. The knees of the universal form are the planetary system of the name Sutala, and the two thighs are the Vitala and Atala planetary systems. The hips are Mahitala, and outer space is the depression of his navel. And there's no purport here, so we carry on to verse 28. The chest of the original personality of the gigantic form is the luminary planetary system. His neck is the Maha planets. His mouth is the Janas planets. And his forehead is the Tapas planetary system. The topmost planetary system, known as Satyaloka, is the head of he who has 1,000 heads. So, in the purport, Prabhupada gives a little further elaboration. The effulgent, luminary planets like Sun and Moon, they're situated almost in the middle. And so they're known as the chest of the universal form. Yeah, the verse doesn't talk about that actually. But then above them are the places of what Prabhupada calls the universal directorate demigods, Mahajana and Tapa. And then above all is Satyaloka, where Prabhupada says, Vishnu, Brahma and Shiva, of course Brahma, but Vishnu and Shiva also, Prabhupada says, they reside there. And this particular Vishnu is Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. Yes, who's super soul within everyone's heart and who's within every atom. He acts as the super soul of each of us. So Prabhupada makes the point that all of this is described in Bhagavad Gita, particularly in chapter 10, verse 42. So now, text 29. His arms are the demigods headed by Indra. The 10 directional sides are his ears, and physical sound is his sense of hearing. His nostrils are the 2 Ashvini Kumars, and material fragrance is his sense of smell. His mouth is blazing fire. Sure. Very interesting. So, Prabhupada says that this is described further in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So we can understand Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study for someone who's already sort of done Bhagavad Gita. Both of them are the science of Krishna, the absolute truth, and so they are interdependent. That's interesting. They are Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, interdependent. So, okay, now there's a second paragraph here. And Prabhupada, first of all, makes the statement that this conception of the universal form includes all the demigods and just all the living beings. And so even the smallest part of a living being is under the control of an agency of the Lord. Like, in our digestive system, I had different things this morning, but all the things are under the control of some demigod, actually, as it passes through the digestive system. And he or she knows where that pistachio nut now is in the process. Yeah. So since the demigods are part of the universal form, when we worship the Lord, they're also pleased, because it's like watering the root of the tree. Nourishes all the different component parts. And therefore, the worship of the universal form, if it's done nicely, it leads people at least on or to the right path. They don't need to be misled to worship demigods independently, because they know they're part of this form of the Lord. It's very interesting, actually. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the real entity is the Lord himself, and all others are imaginary, for everything is included in him only. Okay. Verse 30. The sphere of outer space constitutes his eye pits, and the eyeball is the sun as the power of seeing. His eyelids are both the day and night, and in the movements of his eyebrows, the Brahma and similar supreme personalities reside. His palate is the director of water, Varuna, and the juice or essence of everything is his tongue. Really amazing. So, this, Prabhupada makes the point, this may seem contradictory because the sun is described as the eyeball of the Lord and sometimes as the sphere of outer space. But Prabhupada makes the point, there's no room for quote-unquote common sense in injunctions of Shastra. Common sense is always imperfect, whereas Shastra is always perfect and complete. So Prabhupada says, he concludes the purport, if there is any incongruity, it is due to our imperfection and not the Shastras. That is the method of approaching Vedic wisdom. That's really amazing. Verse 31, they say that the Vedic hymns are the cerebral passage of the Lord, and his jaws of teeth are Yama, god of death, who punishes the sinners. The art of affection is his set of teeth, and the most alluring, illusory material energy is his smile. The great ocean of material creation is but the casting of his glance over us. Sure, it's amazing, isn't it? It is amazing. So anyway, Srila Prabhupada comments that the Vedas say the material world is the result of the Lord glancing over material energy. which is otherwise illusory. And as conditioned souls, we should know that the material world is an imitation of reality. And those captivated by it are put under the direction of the controller of sinners. And who is that? Yamaraj. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the intelligent person who can grasp these truths about the Lord becomes a soul fully surrendered unto him. 32. Modesty is the upper portion of his lips. Hankering is his chin. Religion is the breast of the Lord, and irreligion is his back. Brahmaji, who generates all living beings in the material world, is his genitals, and the Mitra Varunas are his two testicles. The ocean is his waist, and the hills and mountains are the stacks of his bones. Right, so Prabhupada comments, this shows how personal the Lord is. He's complete with all bodily organs. But they all have functions. Yeah. Not just the basic functions, but they have functions beyond the basic sort of biological functions. So Prabhupada says, when the Lord is described as impersonal, therefore, it should be understood that his personality is not exactly the type of personality found within our imperfect speculation. So therefore, on a certain level at least, we can worship the Lord by seeing hills, mountains, oceans, sky, and whatever, so many things as parts of his universal body. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the Virat Rupa, as exhibited by Lord Krishna to Arjuna, is a challenge to the unbelievers. Okay, verse 33. O King, the rivers are the veins of the gigantic body. The trees are the hairs of his body. And the omnipotent air is his breath. The passing ages are his movements, and his activities are the reactions of the three modes of material nature. So Srila Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, the personality of Godhead is not a dead stone, nor is he inactive, as is poorly thought by some schools. He moves with the progress of time, and therefore he knows all about the past and future, along with his present activities. There is nothing unknown to him. So, Prabhupada goes on, the conditioned souls are driven by the three modes and their reactions. Those modes act under Krishna's direction, so therefore no natural function is blind or automatic. The power behind them is the supervision of the Lord. So he, the Lord, is never inactive. The Vedas say he has nothing to do, but everything is done by his direction. Of course, this is classic Achintya Bhed Abhed Tattva. He walks, but he doesn't walk. He's very near, but he's very far away. All these types of ideas. Yeah. All the Brahmas exist only for the time of his one breathing, out and in. Wow, that's amazing. The air, like there's air within this room here, there's air throughout the universe. And planets are sitting in the air. So that air is nothing but a bit, just a bit of his breath. So by studying the rivers, trees, air, the passing ages, one can gain some sort of conception of the Lord, something, as opposed to nothing. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in Bhagavad Gita 12:5, it is stated that those who are much inclined to the formless conception of the Supreme Truth are more troubled than those who can intelligently conceive of the personal form. Verse 34, which also doesn't have a purport. So we are moving on here. O best amongst the Kurus, the clouds which carry water are the hairs on his head. The terminations of days or nights are his dress. And the supreme cause of material creation is his intelligence. His mind is the moon, the reservoir of all changes. Wow, amazing. 35, which also incidentally has no purport. The principle of matter, Mahatattva, is the consciousness of the omnipresent Lord, as asserted by the experts, and Rudradev is his ego. The horse, mule, camel, and elephant are his nails, and wild animals and all quadrupeds are situated in the belt zone of the Lord. Yeah, so there's no purport there also. 36. Varieties of birds are indications of his masterful artistic sense. Manu, the father of mankind, is the emblem of his standard intelligence, and humanity is his residence. The celestial species of human beings, like the Gandharvas, Vidyadharas, Charanas, and angels, all represent his musical rhythm, and the demoniac soldiers are representations of his wonderful prowess. So yes, so at the beginning of the purport, Prabhupada discusses the artistic sense of the Lord. The birds, some of the birds are very colorful, attractive, very interesting like that. And some of them some of the humans, like the Gandharvas or Vidyadharas, they sing. And their musical rhythm represents that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when the verse says, Shukadev says, humanity is the Lord's residence, it means we are meant for God realization. Then Prahlad doesn't really appear, actually. No, he doesn't appear, but I mean, he's there somewhere. I mean, he's not mentioned. Prahlad represents the Lord in the families of demons. So everyone has some duty in relation to this universal body. Disruption in doing those duties causes disharmony within the whole universe between one living entity and another. So, but when they are doing their duties, then complete unity is there, including animals and humans. And Prabhupada makes the point in the purport that Lord Chaitanya displayed this when he was in the Jarikanda forest. I'm sure we all know that pastime. So Prabhupada concludes by saying, that is the way to peace and amity all over the world. Yeah, because if everyone does everything that they are meant to very nicely, then there will be harmony between all the different entities, be they animals, humans. Like in Jarikanda, the tigers and deers, they're described in very vivid terms. So when living entities are engaged like that, Prabhupada says, that is the way to peace and unity all over the world. So, okay, verse 37. The Virat Purusha's face is the Brahmins, his arms are the Kshatriyas, his thighs are the Vaishyas, and the Sudras are under the protection of his feet. All the worshipable demigods are also overtaken by him, and it is the duty of everyone to perform sacrifices with feasible goods to appease the Lord. So Prabhupada says that monotheism is practically suggested here. Yeah. That even though in the Vedic literatures, offering of many different types of sacrifices to many different demigods and people like that is mentioned, but this verse is suggesting that people should recognize the demigods as being part of the universal form, and therefore they're worshipped through him, through the Supreme Lord. Right. Right. So traditionally these sacrifices to all the demigods and everyone were done in ritualistic ways with fire and ghee. But now humanity should learn how to use all goods, manufactured or acquired in whatever way, in sacrifice, but to propagate the glory of the Lord, not just ritualistic sacrifice for the demigods. So the Brahmins, so how can this be done? Organizing these sacrifices to propagate the glory of the Lord. Prabhupada makes the point that the Brahmins can give direction for those sacrifices in consultation with previous acharyas. Kshatriyas can give facilities for the sacrifices. Vaishyas can provide goods for offering in the sacrifices. And Sudras can offer their manual labor. So like that, by cooperation of all classes of humans, the sacrifice of congregational chanting of the holy names can be executed for the welfare of all people in the world. 38. I have thus explained to you the gross material gigantic conception of the personality of Godhead. One who seriously desires liberation concentrates his mind on this form of the Lord, because there's nothing more than this in the material world, because that it is the material world. So, Prabhupada gives a fairly extensive purport in Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 10. Maya jakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. This material nature is working under my direction. Yes. So Prabhupada says in that verse, the Lord has explained that material nature is only an order-carrying agent of His. Yes. It only acts under His direction. He glances, and then the processes develop from there. And second paragraph. So less intelligent people can't grasp the idea of the Lord's inconceivable potency by which He seems human. So therefore His appearance, like the universe, is His causeless mercy. And having spoken to a lot of people about these things, there are many people in Hindu society who feel the universal form is the highest. Oh yes, many, many. Definitely more often than not amongst Hindus. Of course, amongst real Vaishnavas, they understand, generally whatever sampradaya they're in, but those who are not in sampradaya, then they think, oh, look, Arjuna had to be given special eyes. So it's a higher level of form. He saw Krishna with his two regular eyes. But now this form he couldn't see with those eyes. So this form must be higher. Unfortunately, they are mistaken. And so therefore, for people like that, His appearance like this is His causeless mercy. He helps them at least start coming to grips with the Lord. Scientists offer more respect to material manifestation rather than to spiritual things, concepts of the soul, etc. The Lord's form is beyond their jurisdiction. He's both localized, He's also all-pervasive. They don't get it. They think of everything in terms of their own experience. So because such people can't accept the personal form of the Lord, He gives them the universal form. And if they approach it nicely, humbly, then gradually they can come to the point of accepting Krishna as a person. Yeah. So here's an interesting point. The materialistic people, the scientists and whoever, their minds are unsteady. They tend to go here and there and there and there and just all around. So therefore they're advised to think of the universal form, which is here and there and there and up and down at the same time. So you can't miss it. The personal form, you can miss it. Yeah. Because it seems to be limited by time and space. Yeah. So by focusing on the universal form in all these different ways, wherever they look, they're seeing it. Then this will gradually reduce godlessness and begin the development of devotional service. And they'll gradually realize the hymns, for example, of the Ishopanishad, that he's everywhere. So in this way they'll become, their offenses will reduce. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, this sense of God-mindedness will diminish one's pride in challenging the existence of God. Thus one can learn to show respect to everything, for all things are parts and parcels of the Supreme Body. It's an amazing strategy, actually. Not that it works every time. Of course, it helps people every time. But sometimes it really helps people to come to real Krishna consciousness. Yeah, one will show respect to everything. 39. One should concentrate his mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who alone distributes himself in so many manifestations, just as ordinary persons create thousands of manifestations in dreams. One must concentrate the mind on him, the only all blissful absolute truth. Otherwise, one will be misled, and this will cause his own degradation. So there's a fairly substantial purport here. So Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, in this verse, the process of devotional service is indicated by the great Goswami, Srila Shukadev, who says we should concentrate on the Lord and not the several branches of self-realization. You know, all these different people have given different processes, which, according to their understandings, they're all meant to be useful for self-realization. This is the Shad Darshan, the 6 darshans, which includes Vyas and his Vedanta Darshan, but then others also, who sort of authorities on different fields of Vedic knowledge. Right. So for those who want to become Krishna conscious, there are many allurements, many distractions you may have noticed. Yeah. It's a fight against material nature. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be difficult. So the yogis develop mystical powers. That's one thing. Or you can become wealthy. But these cause entanglements. So warning is given. Warning is given. So then we go on to the second paragraph. And an interesting point, and it's also in the part of the 10th canto, which I'm researching now, when we see, our seeing is secondary and the Lord's primary. It's an interesting point. We can only see when he sees. We can only see what he sees, because he sees everything. We can't see anything without the Lord first seeing it. And does that sound obscure? Kind of like, what? I mean, it's very interesting. Yeah. If the Lord doesn't see something, we can't see it. Because our seeing, we're getting from him. So that's Achintya Bhed Abhed Tattva, of course. So the universal form includes everything material, and therefore is the supersoul of everything material. But it's also a form of Lord Narayan and ultimately Krishna. So therefore, we should become worshippers of Krishna or Narayan, no one else. Prabhupada mentions how in the Vedas, it's said that Narayan is the source of all. He was there before Brahma and Shiva. Even Shankaracharya's accepted that. That is in Prabhupada's purport to chapter 10, verse 8 of Bhagavad Gita. It's very interesting. So as an emanation of the glance of Lord Narayan, the universal form or the universe is non-different from him. But because it's effect of the external energy, it's also different. Hope that's clear. The example, to illustrate this, the example of a dreaming person is suitable, Prabhupada says. He creates many things in dream and becomes entangled in them and is affected by the consequences. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of waking up, having somehow had a really bad dream, and you still feel it takes a while to cool down and become clear, oh, it was just a dream, so just relax. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. So the material world is a dreamlike creation of the Lord, but he's never entangled as we sometimes become entangled in our dreams. He's always in his transcendental position, but essentially he's everything, and nothing is apart from him. And seeing we're part of him, we should concentrate on him. Otherwise, we'll become overcome by material nature. So anyway, Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, verse 7 talks of the process of destruction and creation. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, every material manifestation enters into my nature. And at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I again create. Yeah. So like this Bhagavad Gita talks of the process of destruction and creation, but the human form of life is an opportunity to get out of it. Yeah, escape from the Lord's external potency, enter into his internal potency. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.